Hi, this is Jim from Phillips Connect Technologies. In this video, we're going to show you how to install our trailer net device in a Spireon pan. So before we get started, let's check out what we're going to install and the tools you need to install them. So the install for the retro install that we're going to do for the Spireon pan for our trailer net product, use a few basic tools. So the most important tool to start out with is to make sure we can loosen the nuts that hold the pan to the nose of the trailer. So you want to use what's called freeze off by CRC. So this actually freezes the nut and allows you to both lubricate and freeze it to help loosen those nuts and take them off, because we use a stainless stud and it's got a zinc nut on it, so this really helps with that. I use a small impact with a 1/2 inch deep socket, but we do use this only when we break the nuts loose by hand. So I use a ratcheting wrench to do that. So that's what this is. Once you get all your nuts off, I use a gasket scraper to help take the pan off of the studs. And once the pan is off, then if the cargo sensor doesn't have to be relocated, we'll remove the existing cargo sensor and install our cargo sensor. But in the event we have to install a new cargo sensor, we use an 1 3/4 hole saw to install the new cargo sensor. We use a number 3 Phillips to remove the nuts that hold the existing device into the pan. We'll use a smaller Phillips if we have to install the cargo sensor into the wood paneling. We'll use that. And then we have a T20 that removes the rest of the hardware from the pan and allows us to install the PCT trailer net device. Okay, for the components we're going to use for this install are start at the gateway. So this is the Phillips trailer net gateway 4G LTE with Bluetooth. So this is mounted on a mounting plate, and this mounting plate is going to go in the existing pan, and it's going to connect to this harness. So this is a harness that we designed to connect the cargo sensor, and it also connects to the existing power that is already up in the trailer, so we don't have to rewire it. So this is the harness that we'll use, and we'll connect it to this ultrasonic cargo sensor with this connector. So we're going to replace the old gasket with a brand new gasket, rubber gasket. We'll go over the studs before we put the pan back on. Once that's installed, this will come with it. This is an adapter. So Spireon has a 6-wire power harness, and then they also have a 4-wire. So as you can see, this comes with a 4-wire, but in the event that it has a 6-wire, we want to just use this adapter in order to plug it in, so you don't have to do any splicing. So this will come with the kit as well. And then we have the 5/16 18 serrated nuts. Give you a lot of extra ones in the event that you strip one or it becomes in bad shape. You want to have some extra nuts. And the last thing we'll do is we will power up the device at the end, and we'll use our PCT mobile app to verify that it's functioning properly, and that completes everything you need for this install. Okay, now that we've gone over all the components we're going to install and the tools, let's go show you how it's installed. William, our technician, is going to show you the proper way to do it. So the first thing you want to do is use our CRC product to spray every single nut. It freezes, helps release and lubricate these nuts before you start to try and remove them. So William, go ahead and spray each one of them. So these are a stainless 5/16 18 stud, but it has a zinc nut. So generally what you'll find is the stud's in really good shape, but the nut is zinc, and the nut will corrode, it'll get rust on it. So this product will really help loosen the nut from the stud. Okay, once it's released, now I'm going to warn everybody, do not try and remove these with an impact. Take your 1/2 inch ratchet wrench and loosen them. You need to be able to look at the stud. If you see the stud trying to turn, that means the stud is stripping, and once the stud strips, you will not be able to get the nut off. So you'll want to loosen it a little bit and then tighten it. If you start feeling it get tight, then you tighten it back up and loosen it and tighten it until the nut comes completely off. If you have patience, you'll be able to get all 24 of these nuts off. But I know, you're going to want to use your impact. So once you get to the point where you got them all loose, then you can take your impact and then you can zip the rest of them off. But you can see William is loosening them. If he feels them get tight, then he can tighten them back up. And sometimes, you might have to spray some more CRC on there to help lubricate it even more, but just be patient. Do not spin the stud out. These are a PEM 5/16 stud. They are pressed into a very thin 1/8 inch piece of steel, and it's very easy to spin it out. If you spin it out, the stud will spin, and then you have to cut the nut off. Okay, now that you're sure that you've got all the nuts broken loose, we're going to go ahead and take the rest of them off with the impact. So the impact clutch is set so that if it gets tight, you can go ahead and run it in and run it out a few times, to make sure, because this is stainless. Stainless galls real easy, so impacts, the speed of an impact will sometimes make them gall under the studs. So just be careful. If it starts to get tight, run it in and run it out. Okay, so again, if you get one that's a little bit tight, just run it in and run it out until it comes off smoothly. It's really important to just take your time getting these nuts off, as if you end up having to take one off and you spin out a stud, I'll go through a process that we can use to get these off in the event that happens, but no matter what, it'll add an hour to your install. Right now that we've got all the nuts off, we're going to take this gasket scraper and remove the pan. Okay, so you want to put the gasket scraper in between the gasket and the plastic so that you're not prying against the trailer. So William is showing the proper way to do it. Once it pops off the stud, you can usually grab it by your fingers and pull it the rest of the way off. So now that he's getting it off the studs, now he needs to be careful because there's two connections that he needs to disconnect. Okay, so as soon as you remove it, just be careful because these can be kind of tight. So you'll see at the bottom side, you have the cargo sensors. So there's a little clip on there. You just unplug that. And this one has a strain relief on it, and it has a 6-pin power cable. So this is unusual that you have a 6-pin, but like I said, we have an adapter for that. So one other thing to note that's unusual about this trailer, this is an OEM install, meaning it was installed at the factory. So when they cut the hole in the trailer, they cut the hole in the trailer a little bit too high. So the cargo sensor is supposed to be directly behind the pan, but it is not. It's actually below the pan. So as you can see, this cargo sensor is mounted in such a way that I can't really remove it. So we're just going to leave the cargo sensor where it's at and install our cargo sensor, the PCT cargo sensor, right above it. Okay, so the next step is we're going to measure where the cargo sensor hole is going to be in relation to the floor. So this cargo sensor is at 32 inches. Generally, we need to be under 40 inches, but I like the cargo sensor, lower around 30, between 30 and 38 inches. So right now we're at the floor, so we can mount this new cargo sensor at 36 inches. So William's marking the hole for 36 inches. So once he's marked it, then we're going to drill a pilot hole. So we don't know, let's say this trailer is loaded. So if the trailer's loaded, we're going to make sure that we don't penetrate the load. So the first thing we'll do is drill a pilot hole and make sure that there's nothing directly behind it. Okay, you noticed on this arbor that we use, I put some tape on here. I use this as a stop. I know that this liner on a Great Dane trailer is 3/8 of an inch thick, so I want to make sure that I don't drill past 3/8 of an inch and potentially hit the target. So I'll go ahead and put a little bit of electrical tape on there, and then William will go right to the electrical tape, and then he'll be able to determine if there's anything right behind it. Okay, he stops it right at the stop. Once he gets to that point, he can use, a probe, a little screwdriver, anything. He'll put that in the hole and see if there's anything right behind it. If there's nothing right behind it, no problem. If you have something right behind it, we're going to put a stop on the hole saw so we make sure the hole saw doesn't penetrate the cargo. So, okay, now we're going to add the 1 3/4 hole saw. So as you can see, I still have this hose clamp on there because I want to make sure we don't go too far, into the hole. So let's go ahead and spin that on and pop that hole out. Okay, once you get to the end, you want to make sure you don't lose the puck inside the trailer. So once you get to the end, just stop and then take a screwdriver and hold the puck in place, and then remove the drill, and then remove the puck with the hole saw. Okay, so next we'll install the cargo sensor in the hole. You always want to have the harness face down. So I've got the attached wood screw connected to the bit, and he's going to go ahead and install one at a time. Okay, now that we've installed the cargo sensor, the next thing we're going to do is put the new gasket on over the studs. The other thing this does is it also helps hold these stud plates in place. Great Dane does a good job of making sure these stud plates are adhered to the back of the nose sheet. Some of the other retro installs, these stud plates can be loose. So if the stud plates are loose, this gasket will really help keep these stud plates from pushing in when you put the pan back on. Okay, now that we've completed this part of the install, we're going to go ahead and install the new components in the pan. Okay, we're going to start by removing the old gasket. Generally, they're not glued on like this, so they usually just fall right off, but this one got a little bit of adhesive on there, as you can see. Okay, now that you've removed the gasket, we're going to go ahead and take the screws off. These are self-forming screws that hold this bracket on that holds the device in. That's your number 3 Phillips. And now we'll take our T20 Torx and remove the P-clamps for the bracket. This is an external antenna. So you normally will not have an external antenna on this. It won't have these. So generally you just have 2 P-clamps to remove and not this extra bracket. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to install our harness. But before we do that, because now we know that we have a 6-pin harness on the trailer, we're going to add this adapter. The adapters we'll probably have in the future. This was just a prototype. Will likely be longer and it won't have this piece on it. We'll just clip that into place, and once that's clipped into place, you can add the main harness to the PCT gateway. It's a 1/4 turn bayonet connector. Just connect it. Okay, now that we have the harness attached, we're going to mount the device into the pan. We're going to use the same thread forming screws. We want to put the harness in first so that it helps keep it behind this mounting plate. So once it's tucked behind the mounting plate, we'll take the same screws that we removed. Again, these are thread forming screws, so they should be in good shape. You just want to make sure you don't over tighten them. So you want to start each screw by hand. Set the clutch on your impact so it won't over tighten. Okay, now we've installed all our components in the pan. It's time to put it back on the nose of the trailer. So the first thing you want to do is make sure we connect our power to the 6-pin power or the 4-pin if it has one, and then connect the cargo sensor before you put it over the studs. So first, William's going to connect the cargo sensor harness to the main harness. So that harness is keyed, so it'll only go in one way. So once he gets it connected, he'll insert the connector and then screw it in tight to make a waterproof seal. Okay, so now William's going to connect the 6-pin power harness adapter into the main harness. Once that's connected, you can go ahead and put the pan over the 24 studs. You want to make sure you line it up nice and straight, and then push it on evenly. Okay, now that he's got the pan installed over the studs, we're going to go ahead and put all the 5/16 nuts on. So you can use the existing nuts, but if any of them start to get tight when you're putting them on, take them off, just replace them with a new nut. Okay, now that he's started all the nuts by hand, we're going to use the impact and tighten them up just snug. So you want to tighten them up, but again, if one of them starts to get tight on you, and you got the clutch set at 12 on this, then back it off, and if it gets tight, just go ahead and replace the nut. Just put a brand new nut on it, and don't try and force it on. Again, if you end up stripping the stud, putting it on, it's just as bad as stripping the stud, taking it off. So just put a new nut on. Just don't try and force it. Okay, so now all the nuts are snugged up, so you can't torque these to a certain torque. So what we do is we use the compression of the gasket to not over torque them. And if you look, this is a serrated nut, so this nut will dig into the plastic. So we're going to tighten this up. So we want to do that by compressing the gasket. So he's turned it up a little bit, and as soon as you start to see the gasket compress, then that's tight enough. You don't want to over tighten these because that's what causes them to leak. So just go around every single one of them, tighten them the same way. I just can't stress enough how important it is, to take your time getting these nuts off. In the event that you do have one and the stud starts to spin, you've got a couple of options. What I can do is you can get a hole saw that will fit over the nut, and you can actually remove the plastic around it, and then take the nut and take the whole pan off, and then the nut will still stay on there, and then you'll have to cut the stud off and replace the stud plate and the pan. So you'll add an hour to the install if that ever happens, but take your time. I haven't had an issue yet doing this, but it can happen. Okay, now that everything is buttoned up and torqued, so the next process is going to be to power up the device and to associate it. So we'll connect our portable power supply, turn on ABS power first. So once you hear the ABS click, then you know that it's powering up the device. So give it about a minute to connect to the cellular network. And then the next thing you do is you go onto your smartphone in the PCT app, and you look at the trailer number and put the trailer number in, make sure the trailer is available to install. Okay, now that we see that our trailer is available, we'll click on the device and then click down here on install, and then we're going to scan the IMEIs from the barcodes that are with each device. So there's one barcode on the device, and then there's extra barcodes that you can put on your work order. So once we scan that and we find it's available, we'll click on that and then click on associate, and that will associate this device to this trailer. Okay, now that completes the install of the PCT TrailerNet product in a Spireon pan.